He's a white Whitmer Wagman. Okay. It's been a while since I did this. Also, do you like the new wall? It is so many fake succulents, but I love it. I love it very much. Anyway, okay. So this is a long list of characters to go through, so I'm not gonna waste too much time with the intro. You saw the title, you clicked on the video. It is facts about all voiced and redacted universe characters in more or less order of appearance on the channel. If I missed any, I'm sorry. I tried. Some of these are in-universe facts, and then some of them are behind-the-scenes facts. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. Starting with the original guy. Nope, this way, Vincent. So Vincent's first car that he had back when he was human was a old, beaten up, used 1990 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme coupe in white with the paint peeling off, and it was just treated like shit because he was a broke college kid. Anyway, now he actually has a pristine convertible in black with red leather interior version of that 1990 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme, and it's what he actually drives most often, because even though he likes having some flashy cars, he hates being spoken to about them in public. So he tends to go with that more low-key one most of the time. Next up, oh my god, sad boy. So for those who don't know, at the time of the channel's creation, I wasn't trying to stitch all of the storylines together yet, and I wasn't bothering to give a lot of the characters names. So this one was just known as Sad Boy. The reveal 3 years ago or so that Sad Boy, Flyboy, and Ivan were actually all the same person was this big thing at the time that probably doesn't hit quite the same now in retrospect, but at the time it was a big reveal. And Sad Boy's second video, where it's the same look as the first thumbnail but now with Ivan's signature red eyes, was supposed to actually have a video component where I started in the, like the sad boy pose or something like that. Yeah. And then I turned to face the camera, and then my eyes would go red. But I was trying to make that video like for a Halloween sequence that first year, and I couldn't figure out how to do it fast enough, like in time for when I wanted that video to release. So I gave up on that. But that was what was going to happen. This is taking a while. Ollie. So Ollie's name went through a lot of different iterations. There's a whole series of facts that I've talked about in other places. At one point, David's name was going to be Oliver, but the name Oliver going by Ollie itself, regardless of which character that it was attached to, was actually taken from a story that I've been writing before the channel that was going to have that character, this Ollie character, be half human, half shade, and like constantly be in phasing between life and death when he would like lose control of himself. And at one point I was going to adapt that into a video series, but it didn't really work great within the context of like well, not the context, the format of the channel, where I was sort of like speaking to a listener character, like the listener wouldn't be following him to death. So it was, and then lore wise, as I refined the idea of what shades are, it didn't really make sense anymore. But that's technically where the Ollie name came from, even though originally it wasn't actually even going to be applied to the coworker. which we'll get to in a second. Ivan is left-handed, but when Vega was influencing him, he became ambidextrous, which, not so coincidentally, is how all demons are. But now that he's completely freed from Vega, he's back to only being left-handed. David, now, I've actually talked briefly about this before, but it's a fun fact, and I want more people to know. So, David, in addition to, at one point, almost being named Oliver, back before I decided that I wanted to make everything take place in one world, I was going to have a few different worlds on the channel. One of them modern day, one of them like sci-fi future, one of them fantasy D&D-esque. And the first character that I came up with for that D&D-ish universe was this big, grumpy fire genasi named Davidaroth, who could then be begrudgingly called Davy. Ended up not going with the plan to have a D&D inspired universe, and I had already come up with this idea for an also grumpy werewolf character that I wanted to make, and his name was going to be Oliver, called Ollie. But I ended up not liking Oliver as the name for the werewolf, and I didn't want to move forward with the D&D plot, so I recycled the Davy name from that fire genasi. I've never known how to pronounce it. And then I gave that to David, the werewolf. So there was a lot of name craziness going around. So there was a time when David was going to be Oliver, and instead there was going to be a fire genasi called Davy. Nice and confusing. Also, when they were growing up, Asher was taller than David and used to tease him about it until puberty hit lit David up, and he's been big guy ever since. Let's see who's next. Adam's last name is Jessup. He didn't take his maker's name. I came up with his last name and was going to reveal that last name in the Imperium video with him in it, actually, but it didn't really make sense in the script of the moment for his last name to be revealed. So instead, the name sat on a hard drive until the summit, of all things, when I saw a chance to reveal it. Marcus's first words off-screen to the asset were actually the same as his on-screen last words to the asset, which were, "I'm sorry." Calum very excitedly made the vanilla extract tumbler cake, and it did not go well. Brachium has never tasted vanilla extract for himself, but he has experienced it through the memories of humans who have had it and then who died, and whose memories ended up in the river and who he could then access. So never tasted it for himself, but he knows roughly what's going down with that. Elliot, growing up when playing Mario games, where Aaron, his older brother, would play as Mario, Aaron would tell Elliot that he had to be Luigi because Luigi starts with L. Elliot went by L at home, so Aaron figured it just fit. But Elliot always really wanted to play as Toad. Flyboy's name is Ivan, and I wonder if that's a coincidence. No, Flyboy is Ivan after his memories of Vega's influence are removed and he goes home to Montana, but he continues working for Vesta Distribution Company, just fully remote. That said, he has never worked directly with Aaron, and Ollie and Ollie's partner have moved positions within the company, so he's not really in contact with any of them anymore, but he does still technically work for the same company. Gavin is ambidextrous. I'm just kidding. I mean, he is, but that's just a demon fact, as previously established. That's not a Gavin fact. Gavin has never read a book. but he has held one and pretended to. And he can read, but he's never read a book. Asher's favorite flavor of Red Bull is the blue edition, which he then calls a blue bull, which is a joke that the rest of the pack definitely still thinks is funny, and definitely does not groan at every time he does it. Lasco is afraid of heights, and that frustrates him a lot because he knows that he shouldn't be, because if he was to like fall from a great height, he could use his air powers to, catch himself so that he wouldn't fall. But even so, the fear is there and he can't shake it, and it annoys him to this day. Damien can speak French, but he's pretty rusty nowadays. Sam's home life growing up was very bad, and the only member of his family that he had a good relationship with was his grandmother, Adeline. She passed away after he had already been turned, and his death had been faked by the department. The funeral was during the day, and he also couldn't risk being seen since he was supposed to now be dead. But he snuck into the cemetery that evening to pay his respects and to say goodbye. And that is the only time that he has gone back to Mont Blanc since he ran away. Cody was going to be named Noah at one point. He was also originally going to be involved with Close Knit, but then I ultimately decided to go in a different direction with the character. Huxley loves bionicles, and his favorite bionicle is Pohatu Nuva. Pohatu wears the Kanohika Kama, which is the Mask of Speed, and because of that, Huxley made it his goal to be the fastest kid in his grade growing up, which he was, and he is still very fast, which surprises some people, but he also knows when to go slow. Let's see. Milo does not drink alcohol because his dad's gambling problem has left him with a fear that he may have inherited that addictive personality, and he just doesn't want to risk it, so he doesn't. Avier has never met Gavin, but he definitely has heard of him from other stewards. Vega was, and now is again, the oldest remaining demon. He was the second demon ever created, with the first being an empathy demon named Polaris, but she was lost in the cacophony. So when Vega was briefly dead at Hush's hands, the oldest living demon was then Ursa, an elation demon. But now that he's back, mostly, he holds the title again. Regulus was supposed to be a one-off script, and it was originally just titled Alone. Eric with a C of My Magic and Me fame, is a Magneto energetic who graduated from the academy in McKinley. Camelopardalis has now been in therapy for the last 2 years to work through the after effects of the Ivan and Vega memories that he took on, and he has not wiped his therapist's memories in any way in all of that time, so that's progress. Echo is just a little stinker, and we had to put him in timeout for a while because he created an entire universe devoted to making people suffer, and that's naughty little stinker behavior. But maybe if he's very, very good, we might just let him come back for just a little bit. Who knows? Brian's name is not Brain, but in the video where his name is first said, it sounds so unequivocally like I'm saying brain that I cannot believe that I left it in and I didn't just retake that line, and it annoys me that I did it to this very day. It haunts me. Anyway, Christian. Christian actually doesn't hate being called Chrissy. He just hates when Asher does it, or when Milo does it, particularly if Milo is doing it because of Asher having done it. Arden. During the inversion, despite being one of the smaller wolves, Arden took out the most shades of anyone after David. She and Christian they got as many people to the VIP box as they could, and they defended that through the night, even after Christian was injured in his leg badly enough that he couldn't actually maintain his wolf form anymore. Kelsey. Kelsey is actually the one who started the Chrissy nickname, although Asher and Arden are the ones that use it the most and have made it what it is today. Aaron knew that he couldn't be empowered because his powers would have already manifested before Elliot's. So he learned about magic when Elliot's powers manifested. And so he knew that that meant that he was too old, and so he couldn't himself be empowered. But even so, when Elliot's powers became known, Aaron used to fantasize about what it would be like to be magical too. And he always used to imagine that he would have been a warder who could do like force fields and stuff. Blake's name was originally going to be Carver, and his original script is actually still saved as Carver on my computer to this day. I never updated it. I just swapped it right before I recorded it to be Blake instead of Carver. Crux thinks that it's weird that humans own pets. Guy's screenplay that he has been trying to pitch is a murder mystery. William's maker was named Gerard. James thinks Final Fantasy VII is the best one. Zeke drinks cactus cooler. Josh, any of you remember Josh? Josh crochets in his free time, but he's not very good at it. Xavier. So Xavier was not the only new character that I had planned to introduce over the course of the Elemental and Energetic Games inversion arc. I originally was actually going to have representatives from basically all of the Elemental and Energetic branches, but that ended, like, there was going to be a water elemental named Finn, but that ended up feeling way too big, and there were already so many stories to tell across the inversion, so many different like groups to try to follow. So I simplified it down in the planning stage, and Xavier was ultimately the only one that actually ended up being introduced. He also was originally supposed to survive the inversion, and there were other people who were supposed to not make it, but because of paring down that character list and then not wanting to take out anyone major, he was the one who drew the short straw on that. Commissioner Jet is 6'4", but that didn't intimidate Milo. Nate Wexler. Nate Wexler's favorite Pokemon is Lucario. He really likes Lucario. Jordy thinks Max's Rustic Pizza is a little overpriced for what you get, but maybe that's because he's never ordered delivery, and so he's never been, graced with Guy Pizza of Pizza Guy's Pizza, and maybe that would make all the difference. Bailey's mother, Carol, is actually the beta of the Keaton pack. Ansel, also of the Keaton pack, is a huge fan of Magnus Archives. Hudson's stage name is DJ Anxiety, but he hasn't actually done any live DJ work since the inversion. He does still make mixes, though. He makes them at home, and he is getting ready to go public again. He thinks he's ready to do it again. Morgan's last name is Kine, which is named after a creepy doctor from one of my favorite games, Dead Space, which I still haven't finished the remake of, even though it seems great and I really enjoyed the parts that I have played, but I just have not finished it. I need to do that. Gregory Keaton doesn't exist in the April Fooliverse because his parents never met there. Scorpius, the Incubus, has connections with the Solitaire movement. Anton loves old school black and white horror movies. He is not a big fan of modern horror movies because he really doesn't like gore, and there tends to be a lot of that in more modern horror movies. Minara, the Sovereign of Serenity. Minara. So Brachium was the last Serenity demon that Minara ever created by her own hands. After him, the cacophony happened, and any future Serenity demons coalesced in the Elysian Well without direct interference from a sovereign. So he was the last one that Minara actually made herself. Elatum, the Sovereign of Empathy, has a particular distaste for Vega, because Vega was created by Dideridon, the Gravitic Sovereign, following the same basic pattern that Elatum had used to make the first ever demon, Polaris, but then significantly altered that so that Vega would be almost her polar opposite. Despite being the Sovereign of Empathy, Elatum is held very firmly to that grudge, even though realistically, Vega didn't have any say in the circumstances of his creation, but Elatum's got a grudge anyway. Henry. Anybody remember Henry? Henry frequently donates blood to the vampiric blood supply. He actually is a platinum donor. Quinn doesn't have any progeny, but he did once hint that he would be willing to turn Darlin. To this day, they're not sure if he was actually seriously interested in doing that, or if it was more of his mind games, but either way, that did not come to pass. Reticuli was an inchoate demon of some renown before Hush unceremoniously wiped him out. Hush has been a character that I have had in the works for about 2 years before he finally debuted. He was originally supposed to be part of another deal made with Echo, actually, which actually was then part of the inspiration for his name. Hush, Echo, boom. Before I retooled him, I ended up altering his character and his backstory in a lot of ways that then didn't make much sense with the Echo component anymore. So he ended up going on the back burner for a while until his eventual debut, which ultimately had nothing to do with Echo. Porter was originally supposed to come around in the wake of the inversion, but the Aftershock series and the after effects in general of the inversion ended up becoming so much bigger, understandably so, but just, it was way bigger than I had at one point imagined it would be, so that he just kept getting pushed back longer and longer and longer, and then I started getting worried about introducing new characters because it seemed like I already had so many, as evidenced by this video. But anyway, it finally seemed like the right time to move into that phase of the vampire storyline, so Porter arrived. Porter's maker was a man named Felix, who was eventually executed at the order of the Vampiric Council because of his reckless turning of lots of progeny, and then his cruelty to said progeny. So he is now gone. Normie was a fear demon, actually. Alexis was William's go-to operative when things needed done, but she also had a nasty habit of causing a lot of collateral damage when she was sent out to do something. So that led to William definitely favoring Porter for operations once he came around. And Alexis claims that she's just glad that it means she has to do less heavy lifting, but the reality is she actually really resents Porter for that, and hates that he was even allowed to take the Slayer name, which is ironic in its own way because Alexis herself refuses to take the name, had no interest in it, but she also hates that Porter was offered it, much less that he took it. Alexander was one of the youngest monarchs in appearance, having actually only been 19 when he was turned, but he was one of the older ones at the summit in actual years. He was over 200 years old. Christopher was turned by Alexander as part of the resolution to a land dispute that the House of Bennett actually got into in the 1950s. Dion is one of the 3 princes of the House of Right. He is the youngest one, and he was originally a freelancer before he was turned. Monarch Boz has been asked twice to take a seat on the ruling council, but has turned it down both times, preferring the life of the monarch of a house to one of a public office. Ephraim is one of Monarch Boz's grand progeny. So, progeny of a progeny, because nepotism is rampant in the vampire world. And last but not least, the most recently introduced character, I think, I'm almost sure, Dideridon. So Dideridon, the Gravitic sovereign, has become, over time, the guiding voice of the sovereign drove. He's the voice that kind of rose to the top. So, in essence, in that line of thinking, he was actually kind of the one speaking when Brachium heard the voice of the drove at the start of the inversion. So yeah, that's facts about every voiced character in the Redacted universe, except for any of the ones that I undoubtedly forgot, and also not including anybody from the Imperium or the Fooliverse, because this list was already way too long. Although, I actually kind of choked through it pretty fast. For how many characters there are? 30 minutes? That ain't that terrible. Long list, but it was also a lot of fun to make. So I hope you guys enjoy. Just kind of a little, fun, little reductive audio. In the meantime, it's been a while since we did one of these, and I do enjoy them. Sometimes it's nice to do something not narrative and just a little fast and loose, Anyway, if you want more stuff like this, just let me know. And regardless, I will see you in the next one, I hope. If you watch the next one, please watch the next one. That'd be cool. Anyway, I'll see you later. Goodbye.